The war had been raging in the stars for 13 years when Earth finally got dragged in. Not because they wanted to, not because they needed to, but because someone, somewhere in the cold blackness, forgot one rule. Don't poke the quiet one. At first, Earth did what Earth always did. Watched. The Galactic Union was made up of 100 species, each clawing for dominance in a war that no one really remembered how it started. Alliances formed, backstabbed, reformed. Empires crumbled, planets burned. But Earth stayed silent, neutral, observant. The official stance from the United Terran Assembly was simple. We are not interested in fighting alien wars for alien greed. They weren't wrong. Earth had its own history with war. 2 world wars, a dozen more in the shadows, and centuries of proxy bloodshed. But this interstellar chess game, it wasn't their fight. Still they were watching, recording, learning, and upgrading. While other species were nuking moons and turning colonies into dust, Earth was quietly refining coil guns that could punch through moons. They were building orbital habitats that looked like civilian spaceports, but carried kinetic strike platforms buried beneath glass gardens. They were training pilots with reflexes wired through neural mesh implants. Silent, ghost-like operators bred from generations of Spec Ops soldiers and zero-G assassins. But no one paid attention, because Earth was just quiet, too quiet. And the galaxy mistook silence for fear. The tipping point came in a system no one cared about. 1 mining colony, 2 moons, 6,000 Terran civilians, all living under the neutrality accords. It was supposed to be off-limits. It was marked in every galactic treaty. Even the war-hungry Thalvek respected that line. Then came the Kroll Dominion. Arrogant bastards. 8 tentacled brutes with ego twice the size of their cruisers. Their warfleet had just suffered a humiliating loss against the Corellians, and someone in their command thought they needed a show of strength, a display, a morale booster. So they chose the softest-looking target on the map, Terra 7, a mining colony that didn't even have orbital defenses. They came in fast, no warnings, no comms, just heat signatures, energy spikes, and the cold flash of weapons systems priming in the void. 1 command cruiser, 4 destroyers, 12 dropships. The first shot wasn't even at a military target. It was a fusion lance, straight into the colony's hydrodome, vaporized 2,000 civilians in 1 blast. Men, women, children. The rest died slower. The Kroll didn't just invade. They purged. By the time Earth got the footage, it was already too late. The Terran flag had been burned. Survivors, what few there were, sent shaky, blood-soaked messages back to Earth. One of them was a mining engineer. Male. 47. His voice cracked on the transmission. They said we were cowards. Said Earth hides behind peace. Said we're insects. His eyes went blank at the end, like something broke behind them. That message played across every screen in the UTA War Council. No one spoke. Then General Hart, head of Earth's silent fleet, stood up. "We've been patient," he said. "We've given this galaxy every chance to keep their war away from us." He turned to the room. Cold, calm, controlled. But patience isn't peace, and they just fired the first shot. They called it Operation Ash Silence. No press release, no media coverage, no dramatic speeches from presidents or generals. Earth didn't care about making statements anymore. The time for warnings had passed. The Kroll fleet had fired the first shot. Now Earth would return it, not with 1 bullet, but with a blueprint of annihilation. The first phase began not with weapons, but with signals. Earth's Cyber Division, Unit 9, activated sleeper protocols buried across galactic communication arrays. For over a decade, Earth had been selling cheap tech to minor planets, translation software, comms boosters, frequency routers, all bundled under peaceful trade and humanitarian aid. What no one realized was that every package came with gateways, encrypted back doors that let Earth listen, watch, and, when needed, shut everything down. So they did. The Kroll Dominion's border sectors went dark in 21 minutes. Military channels fried with signal loops, their AI servers turned into feedback noise machines. Merchant fleets scrambled, blind and drifting. Supply chains died mid-transit, and then, from Earth's orbit, they launched the ships. Not fleets, not formations. Ghosts. The K-class Wraithcrafts, Earth's Black Ops warships, had no lights, no transponders, no emission trails. Their hulls were built with smart metal that reflected starlight in ways that made them look like background noise on radar. They didn't fly in squadrons. They moved alone. Silent. Absolute. Each carried a single mission: eliminate command nodes, sever communication hubs, erase listening posts. Not just destruction, excision. Earth didn't want the Kroll to know they were being attacked until it was too late to scream. While the galaxy was obsessed with brute force, Earth had learned the power of surgical chaos. Meanwhile, in the deep orbital trenches above Luna, the Iron Dawn project was activated. 4 colossal dreadnoughts. No names, no insignias, just matte black metal and spinal weapons designed to cut moons in half. Crewed by silence-born officers, men raised off-world in artificial gravity wells, trained without families, loyalties, or distractions. Their purpose was singular: make the enemy regret breathing Earth's air. But Earth wasn't just fighting back. It was sending a message, not with press conferences, but with the kind of fear that crawls under your skin and makes you question if silence is safety or a trap. 1 week after Terra 7, the Krolls still didn't realize they had woken a monster. They assumed Earth would petition the Galactic Union, file grievances, beg for reparations. Instead, their forward outpost on Station RAL-4 stopped transmitting. 12 hours later, 2 patrol cruisers sent to investigate went dark. Then, their trade route to the Grassel Belt was erased. Not blocked, not disrupted. Erased. The wormhole collapsed without explanation. 32 freighters lost. Panic hadn't set in yet, but it was building. Then came the real signal: the destruction of Oxar Prime. Oxar was not military, not strategic, but it was loud. A Kroll city world, known for its propaganda spires and televised domination parades. Earth picked it for one reason: everyone would notice when it vanished. Iron Dawn 2 came out of warp just outside the system. No announcement, no declaration. It didn't need to move. It simply oriented its spinal railgun towards the planet's northern hemisphere and fired once. The rod was tungsten alloy, non-nuclear, no exotic tech. Just raw kinetic force accelerated to a fraction below light speed. It entered Oxar Prime's atmosphere silently and detonated on impact, cracking the crust like thin ice under a hammer. The northern hemisphere went dark. Seismographs screamed. Tidal waves drowned the southern half. The planet didn't explode. Earth didn't want it to. They wanted the Kroll to see what restraint looked like. A single shot. A message: we can break your worlds, and we don't need magic to do it. That's when the galaxy finally realized. Earth wasn't peaceful. It was patient, and they had just run out of Earth's patience. Back on Earth, General Hart reviewed the reports from his command chair inside Bastion Black, the subterranean command bunker buried miles under Antarctica. The room was dark, minimalist, no distractions, just cold interfaces and colder men. Beside Hart stood Director Venn, head of Earth's Deep Space Intelligence, a man known for his silence more than his actions. "They're still trying to figure out who hit Oxar," Venn said. Hart didn't blink. "Let them wonder." Ven nodded. Some in the Galactic Union are asking Earth to take responsibility. A few are offering mediation. Hart turned, his voice level. No. Ven paused. Sir? Hart leaned forward. We don't negotiate with those who watched Terra 7 burn. We don't explain justice to the ones who called us cowards. Let the galaxy choke on its guilt. We're not done yet. Ven didn't argue. He simply passed another report. New intel. Kroll fleet regrouping in the Nalith sector. 38 vessels, mostly destroyers. They're calling it a defense fleet. Hart smiled. A thin, cruel smile. They still think this is a war. Poor bastards. Elsewhere, the Kroll flagship, Sovereign Devourer. Commander Thriz bristled inside his exoshell, mandibles twitching in agitation. Every instinct told him something was wrong. Half their systems were still down. Their supply routes were drying up. Their outer colonies were vanishing like dust. And the worst part? They had no enemy to strike back at. No visuals, no recordings. Just silence followed by ruin. The galaxy had taught them to expect declarations, armadas, honor duels. But Earth brought none of that, just death wrapped in whispers. Commander, one of his tacticians hissed, we've lost contact with Sector 19. Thriz turned, claws tightening. Another blackout? The tactician nodded. Yes, Commander, no distress call, no debris, just nothing. Thriz hissed in frustration. They want us paranoid. They want us chasing shadows. But in his mind, even he had to admit, this wasn't a shadow war. This was a slow suffocation. Back on Earth, the Terran Assembly convened in the High Dome. President Alric addressed the generals, the tech lords, and the Ghost Branch heads. How far do we take this? Hart answered without hesitation. Until they understand. Not fear, understand that Earth does not tolerate slaughter. We aren't peacekeepers anymore. We are the price of aggression. One of the diplomats raised a hand weakly. If we go too far, Hart cut in, voice steel. Too far was a child choking on fire in Terra 7's remains. Silence. Alric finally nodded. Then proceed. And Earth did. Within the next 48 hours, 3 more Kroll sectors collapsed. Wraithcrafts took out fuel convoys. Cloaked drones dropped metallic viruses into station AI cores, forcing Kroll crews to vent oxygen just to kill the code. Colonies died not with explosions, but with silence. Life support reversed, lights fading into permanent dark. No civilian targets, no planetary wipeouts, just removal, calculated, precision, almost respectful, if respect could be carved from fear. The galaxy finally started whispering the name again. Earth. Not as a joke, not as a primitive backwater, but as something new, a predator that had been playing dead. But Hart knew it wasn't over. The Kroll still had one fleet untouched, their royal armada docked near the binary suns of Velkaris, the pride of their empire, their fallback, their last line. So Earth sent one ship, just one, the ENS Revenant. A ship so secret even most Terran officers didn't know it existed. It didn't fire weapons, it didn't drop troops, it simply broadcasted. When it entered Velkaris orbit, it activated every comm channel in the system and played one video on a loop, the footage from Terra 7, the screams, the fire, the engineer's last words. Then came Earth's only message. You wanted to see if Earth would fight. Now you see what happens when we do. Surrender, or we erase your stars. And then the Revenant warped out. Gone. No attack, no posturing, just a mirror, held up to their sins. When the Galactic Union tried to intervene, Earth ignored them. When reporters begged for interviews, Earth went silent. When a Kroll ambassador offered peace, Earth responded with this: "You mistook silence for submission. Now you'll learn what silence really means." And back in a burned-out sector once known as Nalith, a single Kroll survivor sent a final message before his escape pod lost power. In it, he whispered, "They're not human anymore. They're something else, something we woke up. And now, they won't stop." They called him Reed. No rank, no service tags, no family. Just a code name stitched into the black combat suit he wore like a second skin. He'd been born in a dead zone, one of the silent sectors on Earth where no satellite connection was allowed, no artificial light, no sound pollution. He'd been raised in the dark, trained with bare hands and bleeding knuckles, molded in the cold with only one truth repeated: "We are the line between silence and slaughter." Now he was on a transport ship codenamed Emberfall, sliding through the void toward the Kroll moon Heskar 3. Beside him, 6 other men. No one spoke. No one moved. Their eyes were locked ahead, but their thoughts were a million miles away. The mission was simple: infiltrate the Kroll war bunker. Retrieve or destroy their war logs. Leave nothing breathing. But simple didn't mean easy. Heskar 3 wasn't a fortress. It was a test. Earth's high command knew Kroll officers were bunkering there, re-strategizing, panicking, hoarding secrets. Reed's job wasn't just to kill them. It was to make them remember what fear felt like before their lungs collapsed. The Emberfall didn't land. It disappeared into Heskar's shadow and let its passengers drop from orbital altitude, encased in carbon skin pods that burned invisible until they struck rock. One by one, the pods embedded in the frozen ridge just above the Kroll complex. Reed emerged from his pod with zero hesitation. Wind blasted his suit. The moonscape was bleak and jagged, with red fog leaking out of cracks in the ice. The Kroll thought their atmosphere was unbreathable for humans. They weren't wrong. But Reed's lungs weren't like most men's. Neither were his eyes. The team fanned out, 6 shadows drifting through a hellish alien landscape. No comms, just signal pulses sent through haptic gloves. Earth's doctrine was clear: never broadcast, always listen. They reached the perimeter wall, half organic, half metal, pulsing with that disgusting, warm, living buzz that all Kroll structures had. Reed hated it, but he didn't hesitate. He pulled out a blade that wasn't made for stabbing. It was for carving. He slid it between a sinew joint and twisted. The wall breathed. Then it opened. They slipped in. Inside, the corridors were alive. Literally. The Kroll built their bases like hybrid creatures. Floors pulsed under their boots like veins. Lights shifted colors based on movement. And all of it smelled like blood. That's when Reed spotted the first patrol. 3 Kroll, armed, casual, laughing in their guttural, wet-lunged way. They weren't ready. They thought they were safe inside their walls. They thought Earth only attacked from space. Reed moved before the others could blink. 1 step, 2 breaths, 3 cuts. No bullets, just blade work. Quick, clean, surgical. 1 Kroll gurgled. Another dropped without realizing he'd been hit. The last tried to scream, but Reed crushed his throat before it got past a grunt. The blood hit the floor and vanished, absorbed by the wall. Earth had studied this. Kroll tech digested organic waste to fuel internal systems. Reed used it against them. He planted a virus module, a compact black hex, right into the wall's digestive lining. It wouldn't kill the base. It would confuse it. Sensor blindness, identity glitches, movement echoes. It bought them 20 minutes. They split into pairs. Reed and Juno went low, toward the command cavern. Merrick and Stone took the armory. Dax and Hale headed for the AI core. No orders were repeated. No one needed to ask what to do if they died. Earth didn't train heroes. It bred consequences. Inside the command cavern, it wasn't Kroll soldiers that worried Reed. It was the smell. He knew that stench. Acidic, rotting metal and burning nerves. Bioweapons. The Kroll were building something here. Not just tactics, not just fleet plans. Something worse. He saw vats, pods, humanoid silhouettes twitching in containment fluid. They were making hybrids. Kroll organic spliced with human DNA. Reed's jaw clenched. The bastards had taken samples from Terra 7. From the bodies. Maybe from survivors. He moved faster. Juno watched the door. Reed went to the console, a bloated, disgusting nerve cluster plugged into a mainframe. He pulled out a neural knife. Stab. Twist. Upload. The device drilled through the biological interface and began downloading the core logs, fleet movements, supply chains, genetic experiments, everything. Then came the voice, wet, mocking, behind him. "You're human." Reed turned. A Kroll Prime, tall, armored in bone plate, its eyes glowing yellow, not afraid, curious. "You came to die," it sneered. Reed stepped forward, calm, controlled. "No," he said. "I came to kill." The Kroll moved, fast, faster than expected, but not fast enough. Reed ducked the strike, slammed his boot into the thing's knee joint, heard a pop, then drove the edge of his elbow into its throat. The alien stumbled, clawed wildly. Reed dodged, landed a knee to the gut, another to the face. Then he pulled the knife from the console, still hot, still humming with data, and shoved it through the Kroll's eye. It twitched once, died hard. Juno spoke through clenched teeth. "They're not supposed to be here. This was a low-level command post." Reed looked around. Then this wasn't a command post. Meanwhile, Merrick and Stone were fighting their way out of the armory. Kroll guards had caught on. Sirens screamed, not in sound, but through color and pulse. Red veins on the walls, purple fog, disorientation gas. But the humans had trained in worse. Merrick lobbed a plasma charge into the ammo pit and triggered it mid-air. The explosion carved a hole into the ceiling, sending flaming shards of alien metal downward. Stone was already moving, dragging a wounded Kroll behind him. They were taking a prisoner, not for mercy, but for extraction. They needed answers. Earth needed leverage. Stone hissed through gritted teeth. "We're 2 minutes past extraction window." Merrick didn't slow. "Then we give them 2 minutes of hell." At the AI core, Dax and Hale had already planted EMP charges, but the core was bigger than expected. Not tech, but a living brain the size of a shuttle, floating in a liquid sack. It was humming. Not data, not code. Thoughts. They were listening. Dax looked at Hale. "You ever hear of a Kroll precog?" Hale blinked. "I thought that was myth," Dax pointed. "That thing's predicting our moves. Countering before we make them." Hale's jaw tightened. "Then we kill it now." They armed the charges. 5 seconds, but before the countdown hit 0, the brain spoke. "You are not what we expected. You are worse." Dax didn't flinch. "Good." Then the explosion rocked the corridor. The base screamed, not mechanically, organically. Walls convulsed, lights flared, pathways twisted. It wasn't a base anymore. It was a dying creature. Outside, the team regrouped at the extraction point, a cratered ridge near the frozen ridge. Reed was the last to arrive, carrying the data core and Kroll warskin torn from the prime he'd killed. Merrick looked at the prisoner, still unconscious. Stone was bleeding from the leg. Juno was missing part of his helmet. Hale was limping. Dax had blood on his gloves. "We're good." Reed looked at the sky. He activated his beacon. The Emberfall decloaked overhead. Extraction pods dropped. The team rose, one by one, silent, spent, but alive. As the Emberfall took off, Reed stared at the shrinking moon behind them. And for the first time, he spoke aloud, not to his team, not to command, but to Earth. "We're not fighting a war," he muttered. We're cleaning up after one. Back on Earth, General Hart received the data core 20 hours later. Inside were the Kroll's final logs, and confirmation that Terra 7 had not been a mistake. It had been a test. The Kroll wanted to see how far they could go. They thought Earth was bluffing. Now, they were dying. Hart leaned back in his chair. "This isn't a war," he echoed Reed's words. "This is the correction." And the next wave of operations launched without hesitation. Earth wasn't going to stop, not until the galaxy understood. You don't burn a Terran flag and live to tell the story. The Kroll Dominion was a crumbling empire, but most of them didn't know it yet. That's how Earth planned it. They didn't want panic. Not yet. They wanted confusion, doubt, paranoia, the kind that erodes loyalty, makes commanders question their soldiers, makes soldiers question their gods. Earth had already wiped out 6 outer sectors, intercepted 12 fleets mid-warp, and erased all data backups that proved those ships ever existed. But the core world of Zirnath, the Kroll's political heart, still believed it was untouchable. A planet of obsidian spires, red fog, and towering temples carved from the bones of conquered species. This was where the Kroll's ruling caste, the Yeztak, held dominion over the lesser houses. They were arrogant, ancient, and bloated with pride. And they had no idea Earth had already infiltrated them. Not with soldiers, with ghosts. The man called Ashran wasn't born on Earth. He was born in orbit above it, in a cold steel habitat with no gravity and no sound, raised by handlers, not parents, no culture, no distractions, just training. He could speak 30 alien dialects, replicate neural rhythms, and blend into ecosystems like bacteria. His voice could mimic Kroll vocal resonance. His skin suit reeked of Kroll pheromones. Even their bioscanners recognized him as acceptable. Ashran was Earth's deepest blade. And now he stood inside the grand court of Yeztak. Disguised as a Kroll priest, listening to alien warlords argue like children. "The humans have no empire, no fleets," one hissed. "They are insects with teeth, a momentary inconvenience," another snapped. Ashran watched. He didn't speak, he listened. The Kroll were cannibalizing their own logic. The old truths, that Earth was soft, slow, primitive, were being shattered by reality. But their pride wouldn't let them admit it. So they turned inward. Blamed spies, blamed traitors, blamed each other. Ashran only needed one name, one target, and his mission would be done. But what he heard was far worse. The Yeztak weren't just reacting. They were preparing a counterstrike, not in space, on Earth. Deep inside the court's sanctum, the High Speaker revealed their secret. A virus. Not digital, biological. Harvested from a corrupted star whale species the Kroll had hunted into extinction centuries ago. Engineered in labs beneath Zirnath. Tailored for one specific genetic signature. Human DNA. Delivered through atmosphere manipulation. Airborne. Slow spreading. Symptoms: cognitive decay, aggression, organ failure, incubation time, 3 days. Death rate, 98%. Ashran's blood went cold. Not from fear, from calculation. This wasn't war. This was extermination. And they planned to unleash it within 2 weeks. Ashran didn't panic. He moved, slipped away through the temple corridors, past guards whose eyes couldn't register his neural dampeners. He slid through shadowed vents and into the lower chambers where Kroll archives pulsed with organic data cores. He needed 3 things: the virus strain profile, the delivery method, the identity of the Kroll science cast behind it. He got all 3. Then he triggered a microburst signal, a quantum ping that would take 13 seconds to reach Earth Command. But it would be enough. By the time he exfiltrated, Ashran had also planted a virus of his own, one that would slowly corrupt the Kroll's planetary archives, replacing historical truths with Earth's rewritten version of reality. By the time they realized it, their children would grow up learning that Earth had always ruled the stars. Back on Earth, General Hart stood before the Terran assembly. No ceremony, no media, just brass, shadow ops, and strategy. He played Ashran's recording once. No one spoke until it ended. The silence afterward was heavier than any speech. President Alric broke it first. "They're going to wipe us out." "No," Hart said. "They're going to try." Venn, head of Black Intelligence, leaned forward. "The virus isn't fully active yet. They're still running simulations. That gives us one shot." Hart nodded. "Then we don't hit their labs." He turned to the projection of Zirnath's temple. "We take out the entire ruling caste." Operation name: Glass Crown. Objective: decapitate the Kroll's political core in a single coordinated strike. Method: multi-layered infiltration, orbital strike backup, precision detonation. Ground lead: Reed. Yes. Reed was coming back. He was off duty, still recovering from Heskar, shrapnel in his ribs. Scar tissue hardening over nerve implants. He was stitched, half dead, and silent. But when Hart gave him the file, he didn't even read it. He just nodded. "I'll burn them." The drop team wasn't 7 this time. It was 32. Elite operators. No names, no allegiances. Each one surgically enhanced to survive vacuum for 30 seconds without gear, trained to kill in 1.5 seconds from draw to death. They didn't wear armor. They wore liquid adaptive skin, metal that moved like blood. Reed led them through the debris field of a forgotten battle above Zirnath, where Earth had planted cloaked platforms days ago. These weren't ships. They were grav bombs, designed to detonate with black hole force on impact, each one tied to Reed's neural signature. He was the key. He was the sword. They breached Zirnath's sky like falling stars, silent, controlled, precise, no alarms, no resistance. By the time the first Kroll guard noticed something was wrong, Reed had already dropped him, cracked his exoskeleton, split his core, and moved on. The team didn't fire weapons unless they had to. They used blades, hands, controlled fury. They moved like ghosts. By the time they reached the throne chamber, the ruling caste was already panicking, not because they were being attacked, because they didn't know what was attacking them. Reed stepped through the chamber doors. Black armor, no insignia, just silence. The Kroll high speaker roared, "You dare enter the Hall of Ascension?" Reed said nothing. He pulled a shard blade from his back and threw it. It split the Kroll's skull in half. Then the team moved. 31 silent warriors tearing through the most powerful caste in the galaxy, like it was ritual. And when the last Kroll fell, Reed activated his neural link. The sky cracked. Orbital detonation. Grav bombs screamed down through atmosphere and collapsed into micro-singularities. The temples folded into themselves. The spires cracked. The ground liquefied. Zirnath burned. The Yeztak were gone. Earth didn't send a message. Earth deleted an empire. Back on Earth, the assembly stood in silence. Hart didn't gloat. He didn't celebrate. He just turned off the screen and said, "They won't recover from this." Venn nodded. "What about the virus?" Hart looked at the war logs from Ashran's extraction. Labs were beneath the throne chamber. Venn raised an eyebrow. "You think Reed knew?" Hart nodded slowly. He didn't need to. He felt it. The Kroll weren't dead, but they weren't a threat anymore. Their fleet was fragmented. Commanders were deserting. Colonies were declaring independence. Civil war was brewing. And Earth? Earth watched. Waited. Hart issued one final command. No contact. No diplomacy. Let the galaxy feel the silence. They used to laugh at Earth in the Galactic Union, called it The Blue Pebble, a backwater planet filled with carbon-blooded bipeds who still argued about borders and currencies. Primitive, slow, petty. That was before Zernath fell. Before the Kroll's throne world turned into a crater of molten glass, and 1,000 years of imperial dominance collapsed in 6 hours. The whispers started before the smoke even cleared. Who's next? Not from Earth. From the others. Ambassador Tellus of the Corellian Accord paced the reflective floor of Union High Command. He was tall, sharp-eyed, and usually confident. But today his voice wavered. Earth refuses to respond to communications. No delegates, no envoys, no transmissions. We don't even know what they want. He turned to the room of assembled species, reptilian warlords, crystalline diplomats, oxygen breathers, and nitrogen swimmers alike, and slammed his hand on the table. They just erased the Kroll ruling caste, not defeated, erased. That kind of power doesn't stay quiet for long. The room buzzed. Some demanded sanctions. Some wanted an emergency alliance. A few fools even suggested attacking Earth now before it was too late. But none of them truly understood Earth. Only one person in that chamber had ever been to Terra itself, an old, forgotten political observer from the Frultari Republic. She leaned forward, her voice a whisper. "You want to fight Earth?" The room quieted. She smiled. That's how the Kroll started, too. Earth's silence wasn't apathy. It was design. General Hart, President Alric, Director Venn, they knew the galaxy was watching. They knew fear was spreading, and they did nothing to calm it. Not a single press release. No interviews. No apologies. No requests for peace talks. No demands. And that's what made Earth terrifying. Because Earth didn't conquer to rule. Earth simply removed threats, like a man cleaning a loaded gun without saying a word. Meanwhile, deep beneath Earth's polar surface in Facility 9, Reed sat alone in a dark room. He wasn't a hero. He didn't want medals or recognition. His job wasn't finished. Venn entered the chamber. Slow, deliberate. "You've got admirers, you know." Reed didn't look up. "From the Union?" Venn chuckled. "From the ones who are scared we'll do to them what we did to the Kroll." Reed's jaw tightened. "Then they understand." Venn dropped a data tablet onto the table. "New problem." Reed scanned it. It wasn't a threat. It was an offer. From the Thalen hegemony, a powerful military race that had kept neutral during the Kroll-Earth conflict. They wanted an alliance, military exchange, shared weapon tech, open border stations. But something felt off. "They're scared," Reed muttered. Venn nodded. "They want to keep us close." Reed stood slowly. "Then we stay far." Back in the Galactic Union, political gears turned fast. A secret meeting was held in the orbital ARC station Pelinar's Reach, where 24 species convened to debate the Earth question. Some pushed for war. Some wanted containment. Some, like the cautious Corellians, simply wanted clarity. But all of them feared the same thing. Earth had no limits, not in range, not in capability, not in morality. Because Earth wasn't trying to control the galaxy. Earth was trying to survive it. And now that survival instinct had become a weapon. In the middle of this growing fear, Ashran, Earth's ghost infiltrator, received a new mission. This one was different. He wasn't being sent to kill. He was being sent to listen. Embedded deep within the Frultari archives, Ashran discovered chatter about an experimental coalition weapon, codenamed Godfall, designed decades ago in case a rogue civilization ever gained galactic dominance. It had been shelved, hidden, forgotten. Now? It was back on the table, not because of the Kroll, because of Earth. Ashran transmitted his findings straight to Hart, who sat in the war room with a face like cracked stone. "They're already preparing for our extinction," Ven muttered. Hart didn't blink. "Of course they are." President Alric leaned forward. "They fear what we've become." Hart's voice was steady. "Then we haven't gone far enough." Alric's brow furrowed. "Excuse me?" Hart turned toward the map of the Union. "They're scared of the silence. Good. But fear fades. We have to make sure they don't forget." Ven raised an eyebrow. "Are you suggesting we preempt?" "No," Hart said calmly. "I'm suggesting we remind them." Within 72 hours, 3 Union black sites, hidden research stations located on drifting asteroid belts, went offline. No explosions, no debris, no evidence of entry, just silence. And when the Union investigated, they found something more terrifying than death. Each site was intact, but everyone inside had vanished. No blood, no signs of struggle. Just a note left on each command terminal. "You prepared for a war we didn't start. Now prepare for the silence we do." On Earth, debates erupted internally. Some argued Earth had gone too far. Others said Earth hadn't gone far enough. But the men who made decisions, the ones deep in the core, didn't flinch. Because Earth's new doctrine wasn't just peace through strength, it was existence through dominance. In a hidden chamber beneath the Arctic Circle, a meeting was held between Earth's 6 silent architects, the nameless designers of Earth's off-the-books operations. Hart, Ven, Reed, Ashren, 2 others. They stood around a table with no chairs, no comfort, just strategy. Reed broke the silence first. "The Union's scared, but not united." Ashren nodded. "They're split. Half want to submit, half want to strike." Ven ran a hand down his face. "What do we do when the half that wants to strike grows brave enough to try?" Hart answered coldly. "We strike first." And Earth did, but not with weapons, not with fleets, with data. Earth's intelligence agency hacked the Union's central command servers and leaked classified recordings, evidence of the Kroll's atrocities that Union officials had hidden. Videos from Terra 7, intercepted broadcasts, diplomatic lies. It was truth, weaponized. The galaxy burned in scandal, governments fell, protests erupted. A Union senator was assassinated by his own guards after his part in suppressing the Kroll's crimes came to light. And every recording was stamped with Earth's new insignia. We remember. Now, no one could touch Earth, not morally, not politically, not militarily, because Earth wasn't a rising power. It was the consequence of everything the galaxy pretended didn't happen. And it never asked for forgiveness. Back at Union HQ, the desperate finally spoke plainly. "What does Earth want?" The answer came not from a broadcast, but from a salvaged Kroll AI, found drifting in the ruins of Zirnath. Its final translation read, "Earth doesn't want the galaxy. It just wants you to remember what you did when they were too quiet to fight back. They used to be men, soldiers, strategists, operatives, defenders of a world that stood on the edge of extinction and chose to claw its way up, teeth bared and fists bloodied. Now, they were becoming something else, something colder, something harder to recognize. It started as a whisper, deep inside the Southern Command District, where classified intel and high-risk operatives were cycled through neural rehab. One name. Reed. The man who'd carved through the Kroll, the blade Earth had pointed at the stars. He hadn't been seen in weeks. No public statement, no return to active duty. Some said he was dead, others said he had vanished off-grid. A few believed he was in cryo-suspension until the next threat emerged. The truth was worse. Reed sat in a black-walled room buried beneath Facility 14, inside what was called a stability chamber. No windows, no doors from the inside, just a chair bolted to the floor, and biometric restraints that monitored heartbeat, pupil dilation, and neural spikes. Reed had volunteered to be here. He hadn't spoken in 4 days. Not since the last mission, not since Zirnath, not since he realized Earth had no more enemies left to fight. General Hart watched the surveillance feed from a room above, flanked by Ven and Ashran. "He hasn't moved," Ven muttered. "He doesn't have to," Hart said. Ashran folded his arms. "You think he's breaking?" Hart didn't answer right away. His eyes stayed fixed on the monitor, on the man sitting perfectly still in the dark. "No," Hart said. "I think he's waking up." Earth's problem wasn't its enemies anymore. It was its own reflection. Across the Terran world states, fractures were forming. Not rebellion, not yet, but doubt. Even among the operatives, the warriors, the ones who had survived Heskar and Zernath and missions that didn't officially exist, they were starting to ask questions no one wanted to answer. What happens when there's nothing left to burn? What do we become now? In the floating city of Arcadia 3, built in the upper atmosphere of Earth's redesigned eco-stratosphere, 2 former operatives met in secret. Juno, the knife-hand second to Reed, and Merrick, the silent warhound who carried shrapnel in his lungs from the Kroll front. They were supposed to be celebrating victory, but neither of them smiled. "There's no war left," Juno muttered, leaning on the railing of a 300-story wind garden. "So why do I still sleep with my boots on?" Merrick lit a filtered burn stick and exhaled hard. "Because we're not built for peace." Juno looked at him. "Then what are we built for?" Merrick didn't answer. He didn't need to. The signs were everywhere. Earth's orbital stations were being rearmed, not disarmed. Recruitment numbers were rising, even though the Kroll were gone. Earth's outer colonies were installing defense grids powerful enough to withstand extinction-level events. And Earth's satellite AI, the Atlas Array, had started simulating preemptive strikes against potential allies, just in case. What had begun as defensive paranoia was evolving into strategic dominance, and there was no one to question it, until President Alric did. It happened in a closed session. No media, just Earth's core command. Alric stood before them, eyes hard, voice clear. "We've become the thing we once prepared to destroy." Hart met his gaze. "We've become survivors." "No," Alric snapped. "We've become executioners." Ven cut in. "And that's what kept Earth breathing. We didn't ask for power. We took it because no one else would protect us." Alric pointed at the map, one that showed Earth's silent operations across a dozen systems. "We've already won, but we keep sharpening the knife." "Why?" Hart answered like a man who'd already buried his conscience. "Because fear fades, and we're not ready to be forgotten again." In the chamber below, Reed finally stood up. The sensors lit red. Neural activity spiked, his pupils constricted, and for the first time in days he spoke, not loudly, but clearly. "I want to go home." Hart received the notification in silence. Ashran raised an eyebrow. "Home?" Ven's face tightened. "He doesn't have one." Hart stared at the words on the screen. "Exactly," he whispered. They released Reed. No briefing, no welcome, just a mag train ticket and a dead biometric implant. His service record was sealed, his name struck from the war logs. Reed wasn't dismissed. He was erased. Because even legends start to rot if you leave them in the sun too long. Reed didn't return to a city. He went to a dead zone in the Outland district, where no tech reached, where no cameras scanned, where the sky still looked like the old Earth sky. He lived in silence, chopping wood, fixing old gear, breathing, trying to feel human again. But every night, in the blackness behind his eyelids, he still saw Zirnath burn. He still felt the blade in his hand. He still heard the silence Earth left behind, not peace, just the absence of noise. And it haunted him. Meanwhile, Earth continued to prepare. New recruits were trained not in war zones, but in simulations of internal collapse. Urban unrest, civil breakdown, planetary disobedience. Because someone in Earth's upper command had realized, the next war wouldn't be fought out there, it would be fought at home. And they weren't wrong. Because in the shadows of Earth's lower levels, the megastructure gutters where light barely reached, a new resistance was forming. Not foreign, Terran, ex-soldiers, black op ghosts, civilians who had seen too much, engineers who had built too many weapons for enemies that no longer existed. They didn't call themselves rebels. They called themselves Echo. Their logo was simple. A Terran flag, torn in half, with the words, "We never voted for this," underneath. Juno and Merrick joined Echo, not to start a war, but to make sure Earth remembered why it started fighting in the first place, not for dominance, not for silence, but for freedom. And somewhere in the Dead Zone woods, Reed received a coded signal. He stared at it for a long time. No words, just an old unit tag, the one they all carried before the Kroll War began, the one they buried once Earth started doing worse things than the enemy ever did. Reed didn't reply, not right away, but the next morning he sharpened his blade again, and for the first time in months he didn't feel numb. He felt purpose, because Earth had silenced the galaxy. But now someone had to speak for its soul. The fire started in District K9, a mid-level arcology buried deep inside Earth's second orbital ring. It wasn't an explosion. It wasn't sabotage. It was a protest. Just a group of civilians, tired of food rations, tired of curfews, tired of being treated like assets instead of citizens. The flames didn't burn long. Earth's riot suppressors responded in under 6 minutes. But the message survived the fire, spray-painted in rough black across the wall of a government building. We're not the enemy anymore. The president never saw it, because by then President Alric was gone. Resigned, quietly. No press release, no successor named. Some said he'd disappeared into the Outlands. Others said the Silent Council had forced him out. The truth was simpler. Alric had finally realized he no longer ran Earth. General Hart did, and Hart didn't believe in democracy. He believed in continuity. In a forgotten bunker once used during the asteroid flood crisis, Echo had taken root. What started as whispers had become an organized network. Disillusioned soldiers, old agents, data leakers, AI defectors, all working under the same goal: stop Earth's descent into empire. Juno stood at the center of it now, her sharp eyes scanning resistance footage from 23 sectors. "It's spreading," she muttered. "Even outer colonies are pushing back." Merrick, seated across from her, lit a burn stick. "They're scared." Juno turned. "Of who? The galaxy's quiet. There's no enemy." Merrick exhaled smoke. "That's the problem. When soldiers don't have someone to shoot, they start shooting at each other." Reed had returned. But not to lead. He arrived with no orders, no rank, just a battered backpack and a blade he hadn't unsheathed in months. The younger recruits whispered his name like it was legend. But Reed wasn't a ghost anymore. He was a man, haunted, yes, but breathing, and determined not to lose what little humanity he had left. Juno greeted him with a nod. "Didn't think you'd show." Reed looked around the bunker. "Didn't think I'd have to." Merrick grinned. "Welcome back to the fight." Reed shook his head. "This isn't a fight." His voice was low, heavy. "This is a correction." Across Earth's upper command, the mood had shifted. There were no more speeches, no more missions of peace, just silent deployments, internal monitoring, AI flagged behavioral profiling. Earth's government had become paranoid, afraid of dissidents, defectors, and even their own operatives. They started issuing re-education protocols, mandatory loyalty implants, neural dampening for anyone flagged as potentially unstable. And Earth's population, once proud, once defiant, began to fold under the weight of quiet terror. Because now, the war wasn't out there. It was here, and it wore the Terran flag. Ven stood in Hart's office, older, paler, his face drawn with tension. "There's chatter. Too much to ignore. Something's building." Hart didn't look up from his console. "Echo?" "Yes. And it's not just fringe actors anymore. They've got ex-Black Ops, some of yours." Hart finally met his eyes. "Reed?" Ven hesitated. "Yes." Hart leaned back, silent, thoughtful. He didn't look angry. He looked disappointed. "I thought the silence would be enough," he murmured. Ven nodded slowly. "You taught them well." Hart's jaw clenched. "Then I'll unteach them." The next strike came in the form of a surgical betrayal. Echo's main comm network, a quantum-encoded relay, was hacked. They never found out how. Dozens of bunkers were raided, resistance cells wiped. Some operatives didn't even have time to fire back. Others were dragged into black cells, interrogation chambers that didn't officially exist. But one cell didn't fall. The core bunker. Because Ashran warned them. He wasn't Echo. Not officially. But after what he saw, after watching Earth weaponize truth, bend silence into strategy, and erase threats before they had names, he couldn't go back. He didn't believe in rebellion, but he believed in balance. He slipped into the Echo bunker one night without a sound and handed Reed a data core. "They're preparing to erase you." Reed didn't flinch. "Again?" Ashran's face stayed neutral. "This time they won't leave a body." The data core contained blueprints. Project Pale Sky, a zero-residue orbital kinetic weapon disguised as a weather correction system, capable of flattening a city in under 4 seconds. Primary target, Bunker Echo. Juno stared at the specs in horror. "They're wiping us out without even admitting we existed." Ashran nodded. "And once they do it to you, they'll do it to anyone who questions." Reed stood in silence, then turned toward the table. "No more hiding." Merrick narrowed his eyes. "You want to fight?" "No," Reed said. "I want to remind them." The plan was reckless, but Earth had taught them how to break systems from the inside. Reed and Ashran would infiltrate the primary control node for Pale Sky, buried under the Sea of Titan, encased in an oceanic shell of pressure-resistant alloy and shielded by 5 layers of defense drones. Juno and Merrick would launch coordinated riots across 3 major cities, enough chaos to distract Earth's suppressor units and redirect satellite AI. They had one shot, not to win, but to wake the world up. The riots worked. For the first time in months, Earth's skies lit up with real fire. Not silent disappearances, not secret roundups, but honest-to-God rage. Civilians tore down flags, burned propaganda, overloaded district sensors with EMP pulses scavenged from power grids. Earth's upper districts were thrown into panic. And in the black ocean under Titan, Reed and Ashran breached the Pale Sky shell. The corridor was cold, wet, breathing. The core AI activated the moment Reed stepped in. "Unauthorized entry. Neutralization protocol initiated." But Ashran had already flooded the command stream with false signals. The AI paused, hesitated. That's all Reed needed. He reached the terminal and input a single command string, not to detonate, but to broadcast. Across Earth's systems, civilian, military, off-grid colonies, one video played. Terra 7. The original footage, the burning children, the engineer's final words, the screams, And then it cut to the present. Images of black cells, loyalty implant operations, pale sky, civilians being erased in silence. And finally, a voice, not distorted, not dramatic, just read. We were meant to survive, not rule through fear. We didn't fight the galaxy to become its replacement. We're not an empire, we're a memory, and memories are meant to be kept alive, not weaponized. The broadcast crippled Earth's command for 11 minutes, not because of technical damage, because of moral damage. People saw what they weren't meant to see, and they finally understood. Hart watched it from his war room. He didn't scream, he didn't rage, he just stood in silence, then turned to Ven. "Prepare the shutdown protocols." Ven hesitated. "Sir?" Hart's voice was calm. "We've lost the silence." The shutdown was fast. Pale sky deactivated, loyalty implants suspended, black cell files erased. The government didn't fall. It simply stepped back, as if realizing the shadow had grown too large to control. No press release, just absence. The first real silence Earth had felt in years. Back in the Outlands, Reed sat beside a dying fire. He didn't speak, didn't smile. He just breathed. Because for the first time, Earth had exhaled. The galaxy held its breath. Not from fear this time, from relief. Because Earth had stopped moving. The broadcasts had gone dark, the orbital weapons disarmed. The black ships that once haunted the stars like shadows in the wind had returned to port, cold and silent. And for the first time in decades, the universe wasn't bracing for war. It was waiting to see what came after. On Earth, the flags were still flying, but different now. Tattered, faded, some torn in half, some stitched back together. The people didn't burn them out of hatred. They left them hanging as a reminder, a symbol of who they had been, what they had become, and what they might still choose to be. The cities opened back up. No more AI patrols, no more enforced silence. The loyalty implants were pulled, the black cells emptied. People looked at each other on the streets again, not with suspicion, but with hope. Small, fragile, but real. President Alric returned, quietly and without ceremony. He didn't give speeches. He didn't take back power. He simply stood in the public square of New London and sat on the edge of the old marble fountain, surrounded by strangers. No guards, no drones, and people just let him be. Because now Earth understood the power of silence. Not the weaponized kind, but the kind that allowed space for truth. The Silent Council disbanded. General Hart was never seen again. Some say he walked into the Arctic alone and never came back. Others say he returned to the first battlefield he ever fought on, a dusty crater on Mars where Earth once lost a war no one remembered anymore. No monuments were built for him, no honors recorded. And somehow, that felt right. Because even monsters in the end deserve rest. Deep in the Outlands, where the trees outnumbered people and the stars felt closer to the ground than the cities ever did, Reed lived quietly. He built a cabin. Not because he needed shelter, but because he needed something to build after so many years of tearing everything down. He cooked food that didn't come from rations. Fixed tools with his hands instead of his mind. He stopped wearing black, stopped sleeping with his boots on, and for the first time in his life, when he woke up, he wasn't reaching for a weapon. He was just awake, alive. One morning, Juno came walking up the trail. She didn't say anything, just handed him a battered canteen and sat on the log beside his fire. They stared at the flames for a long time. Finally, she spoke. "Did we win?" Reed looked into the fire. "No." Juno frowned. "Then what did we do?" Reed didn't answer right away. He just pulled out a piece of metal from his pocket, a sliver of one of Earth's old orbital weapons. Charred. Bent. He held it in the light. "We stopped losing. That's a start." Across the stars, the galactic map began to redraw itself. The Kroll territories became ghost sectors. No one moved in. No one claimed the ruins. They stayed quiet, a scar in the stars, too fresh to forget. The Corellian Accord signed new peace pacts with fringe systems. The Galactic Union began rotating leaders every 6 cycles. No more dynasties, no more empires. And across it all, the name Earth carried a different meaning. Not a warning, not a threat, but a presence, like a flame in a dark room. Not burning, just there. Ashran never returned to the network. Some say he left the solar system entirely. He was last seen on a scout ship heading toward the outer reach, where the stars burn blue and the silence is so thick it drowns your thoughts. He didn't leave because he was bitter. He left because he understood something that most people never would. You can stop a war, but you can't unring the scream it left behind. Merrick died quietly. Lung failure from old injuries. They buried him under the stars, not in the military graveyard, but beneath a ridge overlooking the valley he once protected when he was still human enough to believe in the word freedom. His marker was carved by hand. He didn't lead, he didn't follow, he just stood. The resistance, Echo, disbanded not with a fight, but with a vote. They'd done their part, pulled the curtain back, showed the people what power looks like when it no longer asks permission, and now they handed it back. Not to a government, to the people. That was always the point. Not to become rulers, but to make sure rulers never forgot who gave them permission in the first place. A new generation rose, children who didn't remember Terra 7, who never watched cities burn or saw soldiers disappear into silence. They asked questions, hard ones, and the adults didn't flinch anymore. They answered. They told the stories, not with pride, not with shame, but with truth. The way memories were supposed to be passed on, not as propaganda, but as warnings. One day, years later, a Corellian envoy landed in Earth's outlands. He was young, nervous, carried an old metal box with him, rusted at the edges but sealed tight. He found Reed splitting firewood, gray in his beard now, slower in his shoulders but still sharper in the eyes than any blade ever forged. The envoy offered the box with a slight bow. "This was recovered from the last Kroll listening station we found. We thought you should have it." Reed opened it slowly. Inside was a memory crystal. He activated it, and there, flickering in pale light, was the voice of the man from Terra 7, the mining engineer, his final words, "Preserved." "They said we were cowards, that we'd never fight back. But if you hear this, if anyone hears this, tell them Earth remembers." Reed stood in silence for a long time. Then he reached into his coat, pulled out a folded Terran flag, tattered but whole, and placed it gently inside the box. He closed the lid and whispered, "We did, and we always will." And just like that, it was over. Not with a war cry, not with silence, but with a memory.